Okay, good evening again. So today we're going to go in the syllabus sheet, Roman numeral 2, letter B, numbers 6, and maybe we can do 6 through 9. Let's see what we get up to, okay? But starting in the middle of letter B, that's picking up where we left off last time. Before we do so, I want to say a quick word about Purim, which is beginning soon, right? Today is the third, I guess tonight is the 4th of the month of Adar. Purim is observed Thursday night and Friday. This is a bit of an unusual year. Purim does not occur on Friday very often. It's been over a decade, maybe 15 years or so since Purim has been on a Friday. So that's a little different and kind of fun. There's going to be a class this Wednesday, on how to, the sort of intricacies and the conceptual framework of Purim on a Friday. So I encourage you to take that class that Rabbi Goldie is teaching. I'll just say, just for our purposes, just remind you all of there are 4 mitzvot of Purim, okay? The 4 M's, that's so you can remember. The first M is the mitzvah of Megillah. That's the scroll of Esther. The mitzvah is to hear it read from a scroll at night and during the day. This year, we're making it available also over Zoom. So there'll be a reader in front of a scroll and participants can call in or use a Zoom link to hear in that way. That's a controversial thing in Jewish law. There are, when telephones were first widely used in the 20th century, some said you can not use telephone for the mitzvah of Megillah, and some said that you can. And so generally we don't, but these are very extenuating circumstances. Obviously, we don't have the capacity to fit everyone in our shul as we normally would. And so we have some capacity in the shul, which, if you sign up, you're welcome to join us for, if that feels safe and healthy and appropriate for you, given your risk profile and et cetera. But we're also making it available over Zoom. Again, there were some great rabbis endorsed the use of Megillah over the mitzvah of Megillah over the phone, or I think Zoom would be even more so, provided it's a live reading that you're listening to rather than just a recording. Okay, and it's different. Not every mitzvah this works for. It doesn't work for. I think everyone agrees that you can't fill a mitzvah of shofar over a telephone. Mitzvah Megillah is a rabbinic mitzvah only. It's not in the Torah. It's right. It's a post-Torah mitzvah, and so that makes us, open to a little bit more leniency. And there are other arguments as well along those lines. But Rav Moshe Feinstein, who's was very important 20th century halachic scholar, endorsed Megillah over telephone, and I think you would endorse it over Zoom as well. So that's, I think, how most of us are going to fulfill the mitzvah this year. But the mitzvah is a nighttime mitzvah, and then again, a daytime mitzvah to hear the entire Megillah. I guess if you happen to own your own Megillah scroll and you don't have time to learn how to read it yourself, you could read along to a recording. Okay, this is what I know some people are doing. They're going to have a pre-recorded recording of the Megillah. They're going to play that. While they play it, they're going to read along from their scroll. So they're fulfilling the mitzvah themselves by reading from a scroll, but since they don't have time to learn how to read it, they're going to listen to the recording. Okay, and you can slow down the recording to 3/4 time or half time to help you do it, and that's great. If you have $1,000 to spend on the Megillah, you can get it rush delivered. You can have it in time to put on for Purim as well. That's another way to do things. Okay, that's mitzvah 1. Next, that's the only nighttime mitzvah is hearing the Megillah, and again, it's a nighttime and a daytime mitzvah. Next mitzvah of Purim is the mitzvah of mishluach manot, sending food to a friend. Okay, this is 2 types of food to at least one person. So in the past, you would show up in shul in the morning with your big basket of little packages of food and you give it to all people, or you'd spend the day going to all your friends in the neighborhood and giving them baskets and giving them food. It's a short Friday in the winter. You got to get ready for Shabbos, so maybe you're not going to do that. The basic mitzvah is 1 gift of 2 foods to a friend. Okay, so that's like a can of soda and a chocolate bar to to a friend. That's it. Okay, that could be enough. It doesn't have to be anything more elaborate. 2 foods to 1 friend. Okay, and maybe this is the year to do it in a more minimal way. The next mitzvah is matznot evyonim, gifts to the poor. It can be food to the poor, or it can be money to the poor. It has to be given to them on Purim day, and that should enable them to also celebrate Purim as well. If you know of somebody who could be reasonably classified as being poor, you can give them directly. There's actually a custom to give money to anyone who asks you for it on Purim, meaning somebody in the street, a panhandler, anybody who's asking for money, like on Purim, you just give it to everyone. Okay, you should maybe have some dollar bills on your hand because that's like a very established practice on Purim. Maybe during the year you don't give to everyone. Maybe you say this person, that person. No, I give to organization. Whatever your policy is during the year. And Purim, you give to everyone. You don't check. You don't require. You don't make inquiries. You just give to everyone. And there are also organizations that have ongoing relationships with people who are facing financial distress, and one can arrange with those organizations to distribute money on your behalf on Purim Day. So for example, the ARC up in West Rogers Park, it's a social service agency, they have hundreds of clients, and we can call them up. Our synagogue can call them up and say, we've raised X thousands of dollars, we're gonna send it to you. And they say, great, we're gonna give that money right now on Purim Day to poor people who need it. Okay, and that's so we can be your emissary through that mitzvah. You can contact them yourself. There are other organizations, many other organizations as well, that will distribute money on Purim Day to people who need. That's the third mitzvah. The fourth mitzvah is the festive meal. Okay, you have to have a meal on Purim Day. A meal meaning wash with bread, just like any other holiday meal. Like that festive meal is a daytime mitzvah because it's Erev Shabbat. It's a Friday, a little complicated. The best way to do it is to have the meal in the morning. So it should be like a festive breakfast some point in the morning so that you're still hungry when Shabbat starts, okay? You don't want to have big meals on Friday afternoon. There is a way, the Talmud describes a way of having a Purim meal Friday afternoon that extends into Purim. And the way to do that and all the laws and the concepts of that, that's the topic of every Goldie's class on Wednesday nights. I'm not going to say more about that now. It is a possibility that does exist. The Talmud describes it, and if you want to learn more, you can learn more about that from her on Wednesday. Those are the 4 mitzvot of Purim. So go to it, enjoy. And the show, we're really trying to facilitate everyone having a joyous Purim and facilitating those mitzvot. Any questions on that? It's just very topical. I didn't want to like skip over it, or if you have any questions, could be.
I have a question for the first one.
Yeah.
So the evening and morning, is that Thursday evening and Friday morning?
Correct. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. And the shul has a calendar. It's going to be more prominent on our website hopefully tomorrow, but we have a calendar of readings that you can participate in, again, live and over Zoom, and yeah, Thursday night and Friday morning. Yeah. Other questions? Okay, great. All right. So let's go back to our sheet, our syllabus. Okay. Roman numeral 2, letter B. We did the malachot. We talked about cooking and warm foods and all that stuff. Okay. There's a rabbinic prohibition also against talking about mundane things on Shabbat. Okay, Shabbat's supposed to be. I think we even began. I feel like I began to talk about some of these, like I don't remember. Well, okay, if I said this before, it's worth repeating. When the 39 milachot, those 39 categories of labor that we've talked about in prior weeks, most of those labors are agricultural. Right? I think I've talked about this. I think I said this, right? Okay. At some point, Jews shifted from living on farms mostly to living in cities. And these agricultural labors are things that we stopped doing like all the time, right? During the week as well as on Shabbat. I think I talked about this as well, okay? Right? When was the last time you have not probably threshed or winnowed or plowed or reaped in many months, I would guess, okay? And so Shabbat is not so different for most of us than the weekday when it comes to those 39 categories of labor, because we never do most of them. Of the 39, right, we do not more than 1 or 2 for most of us. And so at some point, the ancient rabbis, Talmudic rabbis, realized that this was the case, and that that Shabbat was not sufficiently distinct because we were living in cities and no longer doing agricultural labors. And they said, let's add restrictions to Shabbat to make the day special. So some of these restrictions are things called muktzah, items which have no Shabbat use. We don't move and handle and touch on Shabbat. We don't handle money. We don't handle tools that have no Shabbat use. There's a prohibition against commerce on Shabbat, also not a biblical prohibition, rabbinic prohibition. There's also a prohibition against rabbinic restriction against talking about workday things. We don't talk about business. We don't talk about finances, things like that. Those are not appropriate Shabbat conversation topics. Okay, because Shabbat is supposed to be a different kind of day. It's a sanctuary in time. It's Me'ein Olam Haba, a day that's a taste of the world to come. And so we're not involved in commerce. We're not involved in trying to acquire things. And so the day should be really, really distinct and different. And I think in that rubric, that's why I understand, electronic communication devices and, and buttons and things like that, and things that beep and make noise, and all those devices that are, I don't know, like what malacha a phone does, like which of the 39 malachot is implicated in a phone, maybe none, but I know not using the phone is like really what distinguishes the day and makes it really feel sacred and special and different. Okay. And again, the conversation topic should be different, and how we walk should be different, in a calm way and a relaxed way. When I lived in New York, I used to have a different route that I would take to shul when I went on Shabbat as during the week, because I lived, I don't know if you know Manhattan, but I lived, I could either walk on Broadway or I could walk at West End Avenue. Okay, so Broadway, it was like a commercial street, like Broadway and Lakeview, and West End Avenue is a residential street. Okay, there are no shops. So during the week, I would walk on Broadway to get to shul because it was quick, and it was like fun to see all the shops and what was in their windows and all the people bustling about going through the business. But on Shabbat, I would only walk on West End Avenue because it was an entirely residential street, and it was, much more peaceful, and it was didn't see any commerce. I would just come to shul from the other side. And then when Shabbat was over, I would go home on Broadway again. And I'd be like, oh yeah, Shabbat is over. I'm walking on Broadway now. I'm like here in the midst of all these shops and things like that. And it felt really different. Okay, like I walked differently. I can't really do that here, in Lakeview. Like I can't. There's no way to get from the shul to my house without walking a few blocks on Broadway. But I guess I could take the alleyway and go around, whatever. But I have not gone that far. But everything about the day should be different and special, insofar as different from our workday, our weekday activities, not involving ourselves in things that have no Shabbat purpose and have no Shabbat use, and not a day of commerce and worrying about such things. And likewise, right, tircha, also things that are toilsome, even if there's no malacha involved. For example, moving furniture around my house. Okay, carrying is a prohibited form of labor if I carry something from inside to outside or from outside to inside. What about carrying things entirely inside? What about that? So that's no malach at all, right? I'm not doing the prohibited form of labor of carrying if I'm schlepping a couch up to the attic and down to the basement and back and forth. There's no malacha, right? It's all staying inside my private domain. So that's a tircha in Hebrew. That's a toilsome activity, and that itself ends up being prohibited on Shabbat, from this concept of Shabbaton. Shabbaton means like a restful day, and the Torah uses that word to describe Shabbat, and that's understood to mean that in addition to the 39 categories of labor, we also are meant to strive to ensure that Shabbat is a restful day. Okay, so that means that, like physical activity that leaves us feeling tired and exhausted and schwitzy, and like that's not appropriate for Shabbat, even though it doesn't violate any of the labors. Okay, so sort of an interesting gray area would be something like what about something which is physically exerting but is fun, like playing tennis or something. I don't know. So like that would be. So I would say that's like a dividing line. I think I think more rigorously observant Orthodox Jews don't play sports, but I think a pro sports argument would be that, well, it's enjoyable, so it doesn't really fall under this category of toil. I think, I don't know, I don't play sports on Shabbat. I think it's like fine for kids. I think adults should develop different types of more restful forms of recreation on Shabbat. It's my recommendation, but you can see that's what the conversation would be around. That's how you would have that debate about what's appropriate, right? You'd say, well, schlepping things, that's toilsome on Shabbat. Like rushing, that's toilsome on Shabbat. Playing tennis is just fun, right? So that would be the argument you make. And the counter argument, but the way we're supposed to enjoy ourselves on Shabbat is ways that allow us to wear nice clothes and sit around and have nice conversations with people and sing songs and read Torah, not chasing a tennis ball across a field. Okay, so like kids run around on Shabbat, but like as you get older, like maybe best not to run around. So that's my endorsement, my recommendation. But that's the conversation would. If you wanted to have that argument, that's what it'd be about. Okay, that's how you would frame that conversation, that debate about what's appropriate on Shabbat. Transfer between areas on Shabbat, we talked about that. Carrying is one of the prohibited forms. That's one of the 39, so I don't know why that shouldn't really be its own category here. And tchum is also less relevant for most of us, but I'll just mention that we're not allowed to leave the place where you live or the place where you find yourself when Shabbat begins. You have to stay there for the duration of Shabbat, and that's you have a limit of 2,000 cubits, which is about 3,000 feet in any direction from the place where you are, but that's defined from the boundary of the town where you happen to be on Shabbat. So you can walk to the edge of town, and then you have 3,000 feet in any direction. So that's really not so relevant for most of like modern types of like the ways people live, because you could walk for days and days without leaving the settled area. But if you can imagine maybe some like rural area where there's like a town, or maybe like some European village, okay, where there's like a town, and outside the town there's like a field, okay, and it's like very clear. Here's the border of the town. I walk this far, and then now it's just a forest, and in that direction it's an empty field, and then I walk a few miles, and then there's the next town. Okay, right? In a situation like that, you can't walk to the next town. You only have, or you rent a cabin in the woods somewhere. You only have 3,000 feet in any direction. If you're not in a settled area, and if you're in a settled area, you can walk to the edge of that settled area, and then you have 3,000 feet. So if you should find yourself in such a situation, like that's important to know. It's, you know, I don't know. I very, very rarely find myself in that type of situation on Shabbat, but you know, you might travel in more interesting places than I do. Okay, questions so far on what I said? Anything on set of?
I have a question.
Yeah.
The bullet point about transportation.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of like expecting that to cover like not driving anywhere.
Oh yeah.
I know you were just talking about, you know, you can't go 3,000. Is there like anything like where would you say like a vehicle fits? Is
Great.
it the same thing like
Excellent.
a phone? Like you just make the day different, or?
Right. No, that's thank you for asking. So in the time of the Talmud, there was a rabbinic prohibition against riding a horse, lest one come to break off a branch to use to like hit the horse or help yourself control it. So horse riding was prohibited by the Talmud, not biblically, only rabbinically. Again, if you stay within your, you know, within your Shabbat boundary, right? There's no biblical violation of riding a horse. Riding a car is different because you are, it has an internal combustion engine, and you're when you accelerate, you are adding fuel to the fire in the internal combustion engine, and that would be a biblical violation. Driving an electric car might not be. That might be a different question. So it's actually really interesting. I don't know if anyone's, I haven't asked. I have to look into that, like whether people would say it would really treat it differently, but it seems to me that it should be a different category altogether. And public transit is sort of interesting because it's public transit, I guess, if you get on the bus, there's like the extra weight. In theory, maybe the extra weight of each passenger is causing the bus to burn more fuel. But maybe compared to a bus, each additional passenger is actually a negligible amount of additional fuel that is not, you don't need to be concerned about. And maybe the bus driver or the sort of subway, you know, they're not making, there's no extra energy expended for each passenger really on a subway, and it's making the set stops anyway, and people get on and get off. So really the issue would be paying for the subway, paying for the bus is commerce. And then there's the issue of, yeah, that would be the problem. And there were like some cases of like, you know, discussions in like 20th century halachic literature about using, you know, trains where you have a pass, so you pay in advance and you don't have to pay to use the train, or maybe the outbound you only use is free or whatever it is, you know. And could you ride a train system of that kind, or a trolley car system of that kind, where they make set stops, they're not stopping for you, they're not going anywhere for you, they're just going, you know, for the route that they're on, etc. Could such a system work on Shabbat? And that's been discussed in general, because in general it has not been endorsed. I'd say where it comes up is in situations of people who have to travel on Shabbat for life-saving purposes, like a physician, or, you know, who has to, you know, stay at the hospital until after for a shift that extends until Shabbat, or physician has to go in to care for a patient. So I'd say, you know, if you're like an emergency call and like, you know, your patient needs you, hurry up. So like jump in your car and get there really fast. But then, you know, maybe it's like something that's more scheduled where you have a shift that you're going to cover, and the shift ends at 7 p.m. Friday night, and that, which is 2 hours after Shabbat begins in the winter. So you have some time to plan in advance. Maybe you plan in advance to use public transit, or maybe you plan in advance to take an Uber where the driver is not Jewish and they're going to drive, you know, without, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe there are ways to like mitigate the some of the like Shabbat violations in those cases. But under normal circumstances, we don't use transit on Shabbat. That's very important. Thank you for raising that. Whether it's public transit or private transit. There was years ago, like 30, 40 years ago, there was a very popular synagogue in New York that was attracting a lot of people who had no prior exposure to Orthodoxy. and they had a beginner service, and they had a very, very popular dynamic rabbi, and it was like standing room only at the synagogue. And the feeling was you could get people to come for like 3 weeks in a row. They would just find it so compelling, the vision of the kind of community, that they would like really dramatically change their lives. And so the rabbi thought, well, could we come up with some way to like transport people who live a little bit too far to walk? What if we had a bus that made set stops, whether anyone was waiting or not, and they always stopped at these set stops, and even if nobody was there and the driver wasn't Jewish, he was going to stop at every stop, even if no one was there, and do his route. And could such a system enable people to? So the rabbi thought that was possible, and he went to some more like senior halachic scholars who said, no, we can't do this. Sorry, he was going to call it the Shabbos. That was the idea. So it never happened. Okay, it didn't get off the ground. Maybe it's an urban legend that he even tried. I've heard places here and there, people who have there might be some extenuating circumstances under like really, really unusual circumstances where something like that might be relied upon. But generally, only for cases of like medical necessity, of like medical need. Or maybe somebody who's having medical treatment on Shabbat here. Somebody who's having medical treatment on Shabbat, it's not life-threatening, but it's just a lesser degree of severity. You have some sort of chronic condition that is important to treat, but not life-threatening. Like what would be a case like that? Something like infertility, right? Like that's like somebody who's like in the grips of that. That's like a pretty serious medical concern that causes a great deal of anguish to somebody suffering from it, and treatment. But your life isn't in danger, not urgently, right? And so treatment might entail going regularly to medical checkups, right? So maybe that would be a situation you'd say, okay, so don't drive yourself, like don't get in a car and utilize an internal combustion engine, but you can you can still ride, in an Uber or something like that, or public transit or something like that. Okay. Any other questions? What we said so far?
I looked up whether you can wear makeup, but I couldn't find your answer.
Okay, makeup. There are many issues entailed in makeup, or several issues entailed in makeup. It's worth, and I'm not the best person to speak about makeup since I never use it, so I don't really know what all of the terms refer to. One issue in makeup is there's a prohibition against coloring. Like we don't paint things, we don't add color to something. Another is maybe if you're smoothing a solid that you're kind of smearing and it leaves like a layer over your skin, that might also be an issue. Maybe certain types of lipstick would have that, like you're sort of smoothing out a solid, like using a bar of soap would be like, lipstick is kind of similar to a bar of soap in that it's a shape, and then by rubbing it, the shape changes a little bit. So I'd say that would be an issue. And I would, Orthodox women who wear makeup would either put makeup on before Shabbat starts, and they over time learn the type of makeup products that will, oh, it's a cat, that's so nice, that will stay on for 25 hours without coming off. Or there are certain types of makeups that advertise as being Shabbat compliant because of their ingredients, and it's just like, it's not a paste, it's a powder or whatever. I don't understand it, but there are such makeups you can find, and if you find some products and have some questions, I'm happy to look into it more about whether or not the claims of being Shabbat compliant are bogus or whether they are legit. But it's a real issue that you should, if you wear makeup, you should look into. I think probably most Orthodox women just put makeup on before Shabbat, and but there are these products that exist that claim to be Shabbat compliant, and you can find there's some good articles out there. If you have trouble finding them, I'll see what I can do in terms of getting you access to one. Okay. Any other questions?
I had a question about the 3,000 feet. So let's say you're in New York City and you want to cross from Brooklyn into Manhattan or Manhattan into Brooklyn. Is that borough boundary considered a city, or does the borough boundary count as a city boundary?
That's a good question. I don't think the East River or the Harlem River is going to be so long that it would be an issue anyway. Like, I think you can walk, I think it's less than 3,000 feet from across the Williamsburg Bridge, or certainly across the Henry Hudson Bridge, or the Broadway, whatever bridge you would take to get from. And I know people walk from Brooklyn into Manhattan and vice versa, and people walk from, like Riverdale to Washington Heights and Washington Heights to Riverdale. Those people do that routinely, and I think those bridges are actually not. I think they're less than 3,000 feet long. A more interesting, those would pertain to the George Washington Bridge, which goes across the Hudson River and separates New York from New Jersey. That would be almost certainly more than I'm fairly certain it's like at least a mile or so. Just the span of the bridge might be as much as a mile. Is that possible? It sounds possible, yeah. And certainly half a mile, right? So it's more than that distance, and I would think that would be a problem, but not positive. But I think it would be, right? Because even though there's like urban developed area on the east bank of the river and there's urban developed area on the west bank of the river itself is empty. No one lives there. It's just a road between these two areas. I think that's precisely would be a case where this would pertain. So it's not the municipal, it's not the fact, oh, you're crossing state lines versus borough lines. I don't think it's the municipal boundary. I think it's whether this is settled territory or not, right? I mean, you could have, I don't think we care as much about like the political jurisdiction and the sovereignty as much as the kind of like physical geography, if that's the word, or how built up it is, whatever the term for that is, like the urban environment. Like, can you make draw a line around the homes and say, here's a clearly defined perimeter of this settled area, and then it's forests and fields or river on surrounding it, and then or to just have like sprawling homes and developed area for miles and miles and miles. Like I think in Chicago, you could walk for days and days and days, right? In many, many directions without coming to an open, uninhabited, undeveloped area, right? In many directions. Depends where you go. Some directions you could get, it's like wilderness, like I don't know, pretty quickly, the open prairie. But in other directions, it's like developed for a while.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Let's continue. Okay, letter C, communal. So there's also, I think I mentioned this, I alluded to this before, I'll sort of say it explicitly now. There are aspects of Shabbat which are also about not just, carving out time for our relationship with God and carving out time for family and experiencing this taste of the world to come. It's also like done in a communal setting. And we talked about what it did. I spoke, I think, at great length about the power of an entire community on the same calendar, on the same schedule, being available to each other. Also like rituals that bring the community together at the same time, like shul, okay? Like that's like a Shabbat ritual, even though like coming to the synagogue, even though you should pray every day, or it's a mitzvah to pray 3 times a day, and it's a mitzvah to pray in the synagogue 3 times a day. We have, in theory at least, and pre-COVID, and hopefully please God post-COVID, we have minyanim in our shul 3 times every day, and people come there 3 times every day. There's like people make a special effort to come on Shabbat and holidays because that's like part of the day is like the community gathers. That's one of the functions of a synagogue. It's like a place where people gather, and Shabbat and holidays is a time when people do that. So people who don't necessarily prioritize coming to the synagogue during the week, they make an extra effort to prioritize coming to the synagogue on Shabbat. And the Musaf prayers are kind of like maybe, like sort of where that's like perhaps most expressed, because we only say Musaf on Shabbat and holidays and special days. Okay, there are 3 daily prayers every day of the year: Shachar in the morning, Mincha in the afternoon, Marav at night, and that corresponds like the daily morning sacrifice in the temple and the daily afternoon sacrifice in the temple and the burning of all the leftovers in the evening in the temple. And then on Shabbat and holidays, there's a musaf. There's like an additional sacrifice that was offered from the temple, and so we pray an additional prayer on Shabbat and holidays, and that maybe is kind of the instantiation, the expression of the communal aspect of Shabbat and holidays. So we come together and see. If you're by yourself, you pray musaf by yourself. You say it alone if you're not in a synagogue. But if you are, like, okay, we come together and we say these prayers together. Especially sometimes people come a little bit late, so we only say these prayers. Okay, but hopefully you come on time, right? So. And if you just, I think many of you have been to our shul or been to other Orthodox synagogues, where we say Shachrit is the first prayer that we say. The core of Shachrit is the Amidah, the standing devotional, standing silent prayer, which is said silently and then it's repeated out loud by the leader. Then we read the Torah. Then after the Torah is read, we say another Amidah, right? We say that additional prayer, that additional silent standing devotional prayer, which is then repeated again by the leader. Okay, that extra. That musaf, that's the expression of Shabbat being special and having that extra prayer. And the Torah reading also, we read Torah on special days, okay? The Torah is only read 3 days a week, Monday, Thursday, and Shabbat, and also holidays and special days. So why, this goes back to the time of Ezra. Ezra was the spiritual leader of the Jewish people at the beginning of the Second Temple period, the temple was destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BCE. Many of us were taken into exile in Babylonia. The Babylonian Empire is then conquered by the Persians. The Persians have a different policy. They want their ethnic minorities to go back to their ancestral homelands and create these little vassal states. That's their method of imperial peace. And so King Cyrus of Persia sends the Jews back to the land of Israel, sends the Jews back to Jerusalem, says, rebuild your temple. Ezra is the leader at that time, and he realizes the only way we're going to preserve our identity, or the only way this second little kingdom is going to have a better fate than the first one, is if we can inculcate a strong religious identity. Let's make sure the Torah is read at least 3 times a week. There should never be 3 days that go by without the Torah being read. So Monday, Thursday, which were market days, when people would come in from their farms, come in from their villages, gather in somewhat larger towns for the markets, let's have that be Torah reading day. You can go to the synagogue first in the morning, you'll hear the Torah read. And of course on Shabbat and holidays, the Torah is read as well. So Monday, Thursday, so Shabbat afternoon, we read the beginning of the next week's Torah portion. And then Monday, Thursday morning, we also read the beginning of the next week's Torah portion. And then the following Shabbat, we read that entire Torah portion. So the fact, again, that Shabbat that kind of brings everyone together, we all hear the same Torah portion being read, we're all thinking about the same ideas, the same mitzvah, right? And that's really amazing. You walk into any synagogue in the world, and this coming Shabbat, they're reading Parshat Truma. So you can hear 1,000 sermons, 1,000 divrei Torah, 1,000 ideas all around these same passages because it's being read. Like the entire Jewish people is thinking about these same topics this week. And we all hear it together in our various synagogues, or if you can't make it to synagogue, read the Parsha, read the Torah portion at home, okay? And think about those topics and contemplate them because it's like a project that the entire Jewish people is engaged in. Questions, comments? Okay. Let's continue. All right, Roman numeral 3, okay? Okay. Okay, holidays. So we talked about Shabbat. Now we talk a little more broadly about holidays. How do I want to say this? The holidays are an interesting partnership between God and the Jewish people, insofar as the Torah says these are the days when you celebrate holidays, and these are what the holidays are commemorating. And then the Torah also says you declare them. Okay, these are the holidays when you declare them. So somehow there's some sort of partnership between us and God. So there's dates that are sanctified as holidays, and then we're the ones who have to declare them. So the way that, and which sort of is interesting, it's there's some autonomy that we have in declaring the calendar and taking control of the calendar, even though the days in which the holidays take place is actually told to us in the Torah. The way that played out is in the system of sanctification of months, and the old system, and how that ended up into how that shifted into the system that we have today. So that's sort of here's what happened. The Torah says that in Exodus 12, God shows Moses the sliver of new moon and says, this is what a new moon looks like. When you see the moon looking like this, that's the beginning of your month. Okay, and so what used to happen was that witnesses would see the moon in the sky, and they would come to the temple in Jerusalem before the Sanhedrin, the great rabbinic court, and they would say, we saw the moon last night. And the court would say, great, you saw the moon? What did it look like? Look like this, look like that. You're good witnesses, great. Today is the first of the new month. Let everyone know. Okay. If witnesses didn't show up, why would witnesses may not show up?
If it was Shabbat?
If it was Shabbat.
They wouldn't have anyone to walk that far?
Okay, maybe they couldn't get there. I think they were allowed to, yes. Or I think they were allowed to travel on Shabbat because it was so important. But what if it was cloudy? Okay, so then they would say the next day would be, okay, then the next day would be Rosh Chodesh. Okay, there wasn't a lot of options. Wait, each month either had 29 or 30 days, because actually the amount of time it takes for the moon to circle the earth, like a month, is 29 and a half days. Okay, so as long as about half of your months are 30 days and half of your months are 29 days, your calendar will coincide with the moon appearing in the sky every 29 and a half days. That's how long it takes between like one new moon and the one full moon and the next is 29 and a half days later. So half your months are 30 days, half your months are 29 days. And so on the 29th day, if someone appeared and said, we saw the moon last night, they say, great, today's the first. And if not, tomorrow's the first, okay? There were only two options, okay? But those two options made a big difference. And it was really important that they let everyone know because Passover is 14 days later, right? And so it was really important to let everyone know when the witnesses saw the new month. And the way they would do this, they would send out, they had signal fires on the mountaintops, okay? There's a scene in Lord of the Rings, I think in the second movie, the third movie, right? Where they light, you know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about? Anyone nodding? Anyone not? No, I mean, it's, do you know which movie it's in? I don't, I'll show you. Because I think this is exactly what they did, as far as I understand it.
Isn't there a scene in Mulan like that?
Oh, yes. Yes, but this is better. I think you're right. You are right. Here it is, lighting the beacons. Hold on. Let me share my screen. No, I'm going to share the link. I'll share my screen. Let's see if this works. Here it is. Share sound also. Okay. Share. Here we go. Okay. You can watch. You hear this? Yes. Okay. Imagine this is it's Rosh Chodesh. Okay. So they just declared that it's the new moon. They have to make sure that every Jewish community in the world has to find out that it's Rosh Chodesh. Okay. Here he goes. All right. I don't think, if you haven't seen the movie, I don't think this is ruining anything, okay? I think it's a cool scene, but I don't think it ruins anything. It's not a spoiler, all right? All right, hold on. Here's the moment. All right. He lights the fire, he goes, and from that fire, you can see from the next hill. Hold on, here's the part. Okay, very pretty, very nice. Okay. See, there it is. Wait, around the front of the mountain. See that? See the next fire? Way in the edge there? The beacon, okay. Very nice. And now you can see another one. Hold on. All right, hope is kindled. Beautiful. Okay, so there it is. There's the fire. And then someone else would see on the next, someone sees it. And he goes, oh my gosh, it's Rosh Chodesh. I have to light my fire to let everyone know, okay? This is travels the speed of light, okay? You can send your message over many, many miles. Okay, all right. Beautiful. Okay, very nice. You should all travel to New Zealand. You can do a Lord of the Rings tour. Okay, but they have mountains in Eretz Israel. This from Jerusalem all the way to Babylonia. Okay, the Talmud says it looked as though the entire diaspora, you could see it lit, okay, before you, as these beacon fires would spread the message over many, many miles. Okay. Now stop this now. All right. Okay. Now, the Talmud says what happened is that, okay, I hope you enjoyed a little movie interlude. Okay, the Talmud says the problem is that the Sadducees, who were our kind of competitor, not the Sadducees, sorry, the Samaritans, who were our competitors and antagonists in the rabbinic period, they would light their own fires to try to confuse everyone, and the system broke down. So what did they do? They decided they would just observe 2 days of the holiday, just in case. I don't know if Rosh Chodesh begins today, so it's Passover in 14 days or 15 days. I'll just observe the holiday twice. I'll have a Seder on 14 days from now. I'll have a second Seder the next night. Okay, so out of this Sveika Diyoma, after this uncertainty about what happened in Jerusalem, did somebody see the new moon or not? In the diaspora, they just had the practice of observing 2 days of all the holidays, just in case. In the land of Israel, you know, the message could spread. You have 2 weeks, the message can spread. Outside, they didn't. So they observed these 2 days of the holidays. And then even when the fixed calendar was created, okay, the whole system broke down. later in the rabbinic period, and we switched over to having a fixed calendar with a set cycle of 29 and 30-day months, according to a fixed calendar set in perpetuity, we still kept the practice of 2 days of holidays outside of the land of Israel. And that's the origin of these 2 days of all of the biblical holidays are observed an extra day in the diaspora. Rosh Hashanah is observed for 2 days, even in the land of Israel, because Rosh Hashanah, it's the first of the month. It's the only holiday on the first of the month. So even in Jerusalem, they had to have an extra day because if the witnesses came, it would be too late, right? Like the witnesses would come and say, like, they would, today's Rosh Hashanah, and be like, well, we didn't have any time to prepare, like we saw that on the moon last night. Okay, today's Rosh Hashanah. That's like a big deal. The story in the Talmud is they came late in the afternoon. It was almost the end of the day, and we reached the temple and said, we saw the moon last night. And they're like, oh, you saw the moon last night? Oh no, it's Rosh Hashanah. We only have 15 minutes left in the day. We have to say all the Rosh Hashanah prayers and offer all the Rosh Hashanah sacrifices, and the sun is setting in 15 minutes. That's a disaster. And so even the land of Israel, they observed 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. And even now with a fixed calendar, they observe 2 days of Rosh Hashanah in the land of Israel. The other holidays, Passover, Shavuot, Sukkot, are 1 day in Israel and 2 days in the diaspora. Okay, and that reflects the history of our calendar, which used to have lots of human agency, and then switch to less human agency. But that still I'd say symbolizes, or we still have that memory of the way in which our calendar represents a partnership between God and us. Okay, God gave us the dates, but we have some ownership over the calendar insofar as we were the ones who declared when the months occur. Okay, let's. I think we'll pause. Any questions on what I said right now? I think maybe we'll pause now. All set? Okay. When are we gonna? Let's see if we can just set the next time to meet. What's happening next Monday, the 29th? Wait, sorry, today is the 22nd. Oh, yeah, we can be the 22nd. Does that sound good? Yeah, okay. So same time on the 22nd, next Monday. Okay, great. So I'm going to stop recording.